Okay, this video is a book review. Here's the name of the book. It's called Human Accomplishment by Charles Murray. I always take the covers off the book. It's a pretty big book. Charles Murray is like this American sociologist guy. And, he's a pretty bright guy. He's written some other famous books. He's sort of known as being kind of a meticulous researcher. I'm going to tell you, I don't actually think he's that smart or he knows that much, but I think his heart's in the right place of trying to figure things out. What we're going to have to talk about here, he's talking about the history of achievement by humans all throughout the world, and he's comparing all the great achievements of humans going up to the time of 1950. And what he basically did was surveyed all these books that summarize achievement from all these different countries and these different time periods in the world. And I want to show you a few things to give you some relative perspective. Here is a painting of the Great Exposition in 1851 in England, because England was the main location for the Industrial Revolution, where you started seeing a transition from making things by hand to making things by machine, from doing things by hand power or animal power to doing things with water power, with water wheels, and then with steam power, okay? And more things being made out of metal and standardized in shape. Okay, and I just want to give you a comparison, because you go to a public school and they lie to you. They tell you all cultures are the same. All cultures are essentially equivalent. No, they are not. Some cultures are better than others, okay? Some cultures are more technologically sophisticated than others. This is all this stuff about the Aztecs, okay? They were sacrificing all these living people, just sacrificing them, and then they would, cut them into pieces and they would collect their skulls. Okay, that's barbaric. Now, if you've been so brain damaged by public school and you can't handle that, then go get lost. I'm just going to tell you the truth. You could take it or leave it. They had all these monuments to all the skulls they collected. They had all these piles. They would pile up thousands of skulls of all the people that they had killed and sacrificed. Okay? That's barbaric, okay? Don't get me wrong. We do a lot of modern things nowadays that I think are wrong, all right? And I'm going to talk about that in a moment here too. But I'm making the point. This is barbaric, okay? Now here's some more of the Aztecs, sacrificing live people, pulling their hearts out, and then they'd eat the people as cannibals. Okay, that's barbaric. That's savagery, all right? Now here it is in the Caribbean. They went to the Caribbean. Look at this Caribbean lady. She's in Brazil, but in the Caribbean too. She's walking around with human body parts, that they're going to eat for food. That's cannibalism, okay? Now I could also make a modern argument. Some people say, well, the West does cannibalism too, and I would actually agree in a different way. But, when you do an abort of a baby and then they chop that baby into pieces and they use it to make medications that people eat in their mouth, that's modern cannibalism. I think that's wrong. I don't think that should be done, all right? But I'm letting you know, we don't do that type of cannibalism, but there still is a form of it through what I just described, okay, which is obviously wrong, okay? We ended slavery. Slavery still exists all over the world, but don't get me wrong, it's done in some hidden ways in the United States. It's already making a comeback. We're not going to get into that, but the USA and its founding fathers was good. I was also going to tell you, 1850, England was so far advanced, and the Industrial Revolution started coming to the United States by about 1840. But England had an Industrial Revolution started by the mid-1700s. What I'm trying to say is, these guys, the Navajo, the Sioux, all those different ones, they're still living in a teepee, okay? So from a technological point of view, that is backward. And people try to act like you're dealing with Rousseau's Noble Savage. That is not true. The Indians were very violent, always fighting amongst each other, and they owned lots of slaves, and they scalped them and tortured. They did all these brutal things, okay? They were not sweet, innocent, and mild. They were rough, tough, aggressive, and very violent. That's a fact. You can read about it. It's well known. Okay, and what I'm also going to say, too, is the science and technology, it didn't come from South America, it didn't come from Egypt, it did not come from Africa, it did not come from Persia, it did not come from Asia, all right? This is just a fact. You can look, all these things up are well known. And then, when communism came to Russia, for example, nothing came out of there. There's not a single good painting made since communism took over Russia. Nothing. Okay, it just turns it into a wasteland. Okay, this is showing cannibalism was present in China in the 1400s. Okay? So Europe and Italy had a renaissance, and they were still practicing cannibalism in all these countries, okay? All right, and then the other thing, too, is the printing press came out in the mid-1400s, okay? So it took off in Europe, and they printed all these books, book after book, printed up all the Bibles, all the ancient Greece and ancient Romans book. You know what happened in the Muslim world? The head guy in the whole Muslim world I don't know how you pronounce it all, the Sultan, Caliphate, whatever, he banned the printing press starting in 1485 for 300 years. 300 years got rid of the printing press, okay? So how are the people going to read other books? And they almost never want to translate other books into Arabic, okay? So they're not going to be as technologically advanced if they don't have a printing press and they don't want books coming in from other places. You learn from reading books from all over the place, okay? So you can decide for yourself what you think is a better or worse or more advanced or less advanced civilization, but the things I'm telling you, they're just facts. And I can also tell you, you go to a place like India, okay, what happens? When the Christian missionaries come in there and start converting the people to Christianity, they start producing a lot more things, a lot more literature, and a lot more other creative achievements. And look at a guy like Dinesh D'Souza making all these movies, writing all these books. Vishal Mangalwadi wrote this book about the book that made your world about the Bible. And he says it. He says India was backward before the Christian missionaries came there. And Dinesh D'Souza says the same thing. It was beneficial that they learned English, okay? The British businesses just wanted to exploit the people, but the Christian missionaries helped to educate them, translate the Bible into the local languages, because most of Indian, like Hinduism and stuff, it's not really a religion. It's more like a philosophy. It's atheism. According to this guy right here, Vishal Mangalwadi, and other Indian scholars I've read, they said it is primarily atheism. And, and it's not this intrinsically nice. They got a people called the Untouchables, about a fifth of the population. From the time they're born, their destiny is to clean the toilet, okay? That's not an egalitarian society, okay? That's not equal opportunity. They're the toilet cleaners, okay? You want to talk about something as unfair as it gets, from birth you have no choice but to clean toilets the rest of your life, okay? It's not the American dream. It's the opposite of the American dream. Okay, and here's Dinesh D'Souza. He's done a lot of great things, and he makes the point too, where you see the cruelty and the mass slaughter of the population, it's where you have atheism, okay? And the Spanish Inquisition was a drop in the bucket compared to communism, etc. Don't get me wrong. The Spanish Inquisition was wrong. It was when the Spanish rulers took over the power of it. Okay, now here is the Crystal Palace, also from that same picture I showed first, in London in 1851. So London was the most advanced country in the whole world. It was the most productive country in the whole world for, producing machines, for example. And this is just this giant, spectacular building. It was enormous and rather amazing for that time. It was a leader in the world. Now I'm going to show you, here's a painting of Manchester, England in 1852 by William Wilde here. And these chimneys are the smoke coming up in the air from steam-powered textile machine buildings. Because they used to have the textile spinning loom done by hand, and then they could use steam power and they could increase their productivity. And they called this Cottonopolis, the cotton city, okay? Now here is a machine factory in Germany in 1868. So they were very advanced in producing machines. So while, the American Indians are living in teepees and other places are living in, wood stick huts, they're producing all this advanced metal machinery and industrial stuff, okay? And they'd already produced Western civilization and produced the Parthenon, way back 400 BC. The Pantheon, around 2 millennia ago, 2,000 years ago, all right? And Germany also took off after England and became a great leader in chemistry, synthetic chemistry. Okay, so alchemy, only in the West did alchemy become synthetic chemistry, organic chemistry, inorganic chemistry. Only in the West did astrology become astronomy, okay? It's just a fact. All this stuff is in a book. You don't have to take my word for it. Look it up in a book. It's all well known. Okay, here's the Paris Exposition of 1889, the Gallery of Machines. So there was a competition. One of the things that makes Christians more better at innovating in general is that they're always competing with each other, they're always jealous of each other, they always see themselves in competition. So that's also one of the reasons why Christians are so weak in the modern world, is because even though they're the most common religion, about 2.3 billion people, they're petty and they're jealous and they don't really help each other, they're aloof and they're indifferent, they don't help each other. But they do compete with each other. So this is France competing with England and with Germany. And they had their own exposition in 1889, their own gallery of machines with very advanced industrial machinery. Okay. Then what you want to see here too, here's just a factory in Belgium. So they had their, advanced steel factory manufacturing plants back in 1885. All right. Now here's something that's rather extraordinary. This is what was called the Columbian Exposition. This is in Chicago. It's the Chicago World's Fair. And they built all these extraordinarily big buildings, okay? And they were showing off a little bit, trying to look like ancient Rome. All right, but something magnificent happened. This is where they really put electricity on display in the United States in a big way. There was competition between Tesla, Nikola Tesla, and Thomas Alva Edison. You know, Thomas Alva Edison was sort of favoring direct current. Tesla, of course, was favoring alternating current. These are some of Tesla's induction machine motors for making electricity, okay? And he was with Westinghouse Corporation. Thomas Edison was with General Electric Corporation. And what I want to show you, this is 1893. At the Chicago World Fair, they used the electricity to have spotlights, to light up all the indoor lights, to light up all the outdoor lights, the lights by the fountain. It's spectacular. So people who had never seen a light bulb before came and they could see all this. It was rather incredible. Talk about a portent for the future of what could be done. This is magnificent, okay? This happened in Chicago, in the West, all right? And, you know, lots of these other, you know, the steam engine invented by James Watt, the Scottish guy, okay? You know, they pretty much almost anything you can think of in the modern world came from inventors in the West, okay? Henry Ford, the assembly line and the first automobiles. Okay, Nikola Tesla, alternating current and other electrical inventions. Thomas Edison inventing, you know, direct current, the light bulb, the LP phonograph player, and a whole bunch of other inventions, you know. Alexander Graham Bell coming up with the telephone. Guglielmo Marconi, and maybe really Tesla, invented the radio. Samuel Morse invented the telegraph. And it goes on and on. You know, there is no other, you know, culture than Christianity that did all this. It's just a fact. Go ahead, pull out your books, go search it, you'll see it's the truth. And people should be aware of that, because the reason why this is so important to talk about is Christianity is being abolished from the earth right now. The billionaires who actually run the world, and most things come from them down below, they decided they want to get rid of Christianity because they don't like this idea of regular people being equal in the eyes of God. No, they want to be the gods themselves and have total power, so they have to get rid of this religion that says that we're all equal in the eyes of God. That's why they want to get rid of Christianity, and that's why they slander it and scandalize it, because they don't want any opposition to their power at all. None. Okay? And that's why the Soviet Union got rid of it. You know, Stalin said, oh, we are based on science, and religion is the opposite of science, therefore we must get rid of religion. What he really means is we don't want any other gods around except ourselves, and so we're going to get rid of religion. All right? And the great thing about religion, and the reason it goes with science too, is it says you should tell the truth, you should do what is right, that which you do to the least of my brethren you do unto me. For everyone's benefit, you tell the truth. But there's a lot more money if you lie. So you have to have Christian ethics or everything turns into lying. All right, so here's the relative share of manufacturing output in the world between 1750 to 1900. So here's the United Kingdom, which was the big leader, okay, all the way, and up into 1900 it was still leading the pack. By 1930, the United States had sort of taken over and become the dominant industrial power, producing about 43% of the things produced in the entire world. But England led the way initially. Germany was chasing them close behind. France was chasing not too far behind as well, okay? And Japan was starting to ramp things up. And of course, Japan was amazingly productive. And nowadays, China is amazingly productive as well. All right, the other thing I'm going to try to tell you is once you get into non-Christian, you get into this atheistic stuff, this secular humanism, it's a bunch of nonsense. They're degrading the culture with this modern art where they got statues of a turd. Can you imagine a Renaissance person? They see Michelangelo's Pietà, you know, in Italy, and then they come and they see this. They go, "What is wrong with you people? You're sick, barbarian scum." Okay, this is actually in the Netherlands, in Rotterdam. It's a disgrace. They should not allow that in a museum. A statue of a turd? That's an insult to society. You know, there's really good sculptors and painters, and they don't allow their paintings and sculptures to be in the museum, and they put this stuff instead. That is wrong, and people should be pissed off at that because it's a degradation of our society. It's a reflection of our society. If that's what your society puts in a museum, then that means your society is a POS, okay? Look at this. There's always a building, as Thomas Wolfe said, that looks like an animal cage with a statue of a turd in front. That's a disgrace. Look at this building in comparison. Amiens Cathedral in France, you know, made over 500 years ago, and it's 10 times better than this. Okay, and then the other thing too is, here's like another reason, one of the things I did not like about the book. I'm going to get into the book and more. I just had to give you this background so the book will make sense. Like he puts Picasso as one of the all-time greatest artists after Michelangelo. And that's what I meant by Murray doesn't know much. He just put Picasso because some other scumbag lefty put Picasso high up. Picasso sucks, okay? A high school kid, with 1 month of art training could draw this. This is a piece of crap, okay? Picasso's statuary was a piece of crap. Picasso was a memberness of the Communist Party. Picasso sucks, okay? He was a total jerk. If you study his life, you'll hate the guy. The more you learn about him, the more you'll hate him, all right? And then look at comparison in somebody like Edmund Leighton. He was a disciple of the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood School of Artists in England. He's magnificent. He painted all these chivalry paintings. They're magnificent. They're beyond good. They're sublime, all right? So what I'm trying to say is there's tons of artists like this in the West. And not only that, but you look at these sublime, magnificent artists, Caravaggio, Raphael, Michelangelo, and there's a lot of other ones too. Philippe Champagne, okay? Carl Bloch. There's lots of them. Okay, and then there's a whole bunch of guys that are just 5-10% off, almost as good, right behind them. There's endless magnificent art in the West. Thousands and thousands of great paintings. I spent a lot of time going through it because I really like it. It's sort of a hobby of mine. And I can tell you, it's magnificent. So you don't want to be fooled by this crap. And what does the left have to replace Western civilization? They're going to give you drag queen story hour. They're going to, they're currently in the schools castrating all the children, as many as they can, okay? It's sick. This is sick. This is insane. Children should not be exposed to sexuality when they're young. It's wrong. It's detrimental to them psychologically. This is insane. Insane. When I was a kid, the parents would have chased them out of the school. But nowadays, people are so stupid and so weak, they allow this in their school with their child. It's insane. Okay, now we're going to get right to the book, and when I talk about the book, it's going to make sense. Showing those pictures was the backstory. Okay, so here's the book, Human Accomplishment by Charles Murray. What's good about it? The pros. It covers achievements up to 1950. So it's a great theme. What has mankind achieved? So I like that he goes for it, a big theme. Okay? And he gets the big points correct. Christianity generates most achievement on the planet Earth. It celebrates beauty, goodness, and truth. So it celebrates paintings, art, and other things that are beautiful, they're good, and they're true. Okay? That's why 19 out of the 20 best novels all come from Christian authors. Okay? Once you go godless, then you're saying that life has no meaning. It's atheistic Darwinism typically that takes over, and then basically money controls everything. Okay? And really, you can't argue with what Christianity's produced. It's produced the best men in most fields. Michelangelo, the greatest artist who ever lived. The other magnificent ones, the peak of the Renaissance, Raphael, School of Athens. Isaac Newton, smartest man, best philosopher who ever lived. Okay, best scientist who ever lived. Johann Sebastian Bach, best composer who ever lived. Johannes Kepler, best astronomer who ever lived. And other great ones. Copernicus, 35 craters on the moon are named after Jesuit priests. Okay, that's how dominant the Catholic Church was in science. All right. Whereas the billionaires, they want to get rid of the Christians, especially the Caucasian men who are Christians, because, again, they see them as an obstacle to bringing back slavery. The goal is to bring back slavery. This is well known, to decrease the numbers of the people, the proles, and to bring back slavery. This is well known. It's been published for decades and decades. All these people are functional illiterates. They don't know it. For me to say this is like saying 2 + 2 = 4. It's so obvious. It's so well known. But I realize all these little, mental midgets with their public school educations, they don't know this. And by the way, they want to get rid of the culture and the population that has done the most creative art. Okay, we went through some of these people. Robert Boyle, Antoine Lavoisier in France, Robert Boyle in England, Eli Whitney with the cotton gin, James Watt, Scottish-English steam engine inventor, Michael Faraday, the earlier work on electricity, James Clerk Maxwell, the electromagnetic radiation spectrum, how light, magnetism, they're all about the same thing, okay? Samuel Morse, Willard Gibbs, all these guys, all right? Charles Towns, inventor of the maser and the laser, okay? Almost all big inventions, inventor of the transistor. Almost all big inventions initially came from ancient Greek that weren't machines, and then later on from Christian Europe, especially Britain, France, and Germany, and Italy, later from the USA. Okay, it didn't come from other places. Women before birth control, let's say around the 1960s, they typically would have 10 children. Okay, they're too busy with kids. Because to be a great inventor and innovator, you can't be a regular person working 40 hours a week to make some money to feed your family. You have to be a maniac. You have to work typically 80 hours a week or more. You have to be obsessive. You have to be such a workaholic that people can't understand you. Okay? I can tell you, when I used to be, married, my ex-wife, she would see me with a book walking around. She'd say, "What the F is wrong with you? Why do you F and read so much? You are sick. You are autistic." That's what she would say to me. She couldn't understand why would a person want to read for the heck of it when they didn't have a test they had to take in school. And I'm like, well, because I'm trying to understand something and I want to figure something out. For me, it's a pleasure to read. But what I'm trying to say is regular people don't understand that. They really don't. The kind of smart people who watch this video say, well, oh, gee, they like to read too. Yeah, but they're unique individuals, okay? They're not the average person. Yeah, the average person says, well, you read and study if you got a test. Why would you read and study if you don't have a test? Okay, so anyways, top creativity for all these great achievers, it doesn't come from a Gaussian distribution, a normal curve. No, it comes from what's called a Latka curve, meaning that the far end of achievement is highly skewed. And why is it skewed? Because it doesn't take one thing to be a great creative achiever. It takes multiple simultaneous things, like a whole bunch of things. And the likelihood of those happening are very uncommon. That's why you have a golden age like ancient Greece, a golden age like Renaissance in Italy, a golden age like the 1800s in Europe, the Belle Epoque, the beautiful age. Because you have to have all these things happening simultaneously. And the things that have to happen simultaneously is the people that are creative have to have freedom to work. They have to have freedom to say, you know what, the old way sucks. My way is better. Let's try my way. Because if you try saying that in the modern world, they go, shut up. We do it our way. This is how we make our money. Get the hell out of here. We'll fire you. We'll defund you. No, you have to let the innovator try something. All right? And then so they have to have freedom. They have to have free speech. They have to have the right to debate. They have to have the right to change things. They have to have leisure time, so there has to be specialization, somebody else who's growing the food so they can focus on an academic pursuit. They have to have the wealth that is possible. They have to have a society that supports them. There's some interest in it. They have to have freedom, and they have to have intellectual property rights. If the ruler just steals all the inventions right away, they're going to say, screw it, why bother? Okay, and that's what happened in China. China had not a lot, but it had several inventions, and the rulers just took it. Cheng Ho was this brilliant sailor around 1500, and he could have discovered South America and the United States, but the Mandarin said, no, we don't want you sailing across the ocean, and they destroyed all his boats, and that was the end of the China sailing to other places, okay? They wouldn't let, China had really advanced metallurgy, I forget the exact century, but the Chinese rulers, the Mandarins, they said, nope, we don't want this metallurgy stuff, and just destroyed the factories to make it. So they couldn't do it. So you have to have the willingness in the society and the ruler that you want scientific innovation to happen. I think what happened, one of the reasons for it in Europe was that many of these little city-state places were sort of fighting against each other. And from a military point of view, they wanted the inventions so they could more successfully fight. A lot of it also came from agriculture. Because of agriculture, they developed the stirrup for the horse. They then developed the horse shoulder harness so they could pull more weight. Then they bred the horses to be bigger and stronger. And that led to the knights and chivalry, because once you had stirrups, you could then joust with a lance, okay? So all that stuff, one little invention built on another. Then they came up with the horseshoe so the horses could, be more durable. All right, let's see, what else? You have to have good mentors, people to train them. Like you need the university system, for example, a good university system, which came out of the Catholic Church with the cathedral schools, like Thomas Aquinas. You have to have a philosophical mindset, like, man's created in the image of God, therefore we too can be creators. And it's a rational universe created by a rational God, therefore it's possible to understand it, and because we're like God, we can possibly understand it. Versus you had things in India like this idea of Maya, that the world's unknowable. Well, how are you going to do anything if you got Maya, okay? Let's see, what else? That's some of the big stuff. Okay, and then what did I think was weak about the book? That Murray himself doesn't know much about culture, art, and civilization. He just copied out of all these different encyclopedias of achievement, all the achievements, and then made a scale to categorize everything. And he did a reasonable job, but what I'm trying to say is when he talks about art, he's talking about what the encyclopedia said. He himself does not know the art. He himself does not know science. So he's saying all these things about science, and I'm like, dude, open a book and read. He doesn't know. All right, but he still did a great thing with this book on trying to make sense out of everything. I'll give him credit for that. Okay, and what I'm trying to say, here's what I think Western civilization is like. It's like this Old Testament story in the Bible of Esau was a really good hunter, but he was kind of stupid, and his brother was a lot smarter. And Esau, being the oldest son, was entitled to a birthright. You know, the inheritance from the father, you know, the property and whatnot. And he got tricked into trading his birthright for a bowl of porridge, like oatmeal, okay? And what I'm trying to say is the modern Western population is letting Western civilization and Christianity be destroyed. What has been the most productive, the most successful, the greatest thing that's ever happened to mankind, and they're allowing it to be destroyed. All the Western countries are currently undergoing a then you know what word comes next, side, to get rid of them. This is a fact. It's obvious. All right? And everybody's just allowing it to happen, acting like it's no big deal. What's going to replace it? Drag queen story hour? Third world poverty? Riots in the streets? Does anybody really want that? No. But the billionaires want it because it's a way to drop the numbers of the proles, and eventually they'll get rid of all the riffraff and they'll just own the place, and they'll have some servants and some slaves. Okay, that's what we're heading into. All right? And I would like to see civilization preserved, okay? I would like to see Christianity not made illegal, okay? You know, in Soviet Russia, they killed 65 million Christians and they burnt down all the churches. And that's what's coming to the West, okay? It's obvious to anybody that, you know, actually opens a book and reads, it's not a functional illiterate. And what percentage of the population is that? About 5%? Well, it has to be more than that if the West is going to survive. People need to read and talk and learn and think and know a little history, okay? You know, it's the only hope that the West is going to survive. A couple more things from Charles Murray's books. Okay, here's a couple quotes from him. When he's talking about Michelangelo and the painting of the Sistine Chapel, he says, "What Michelangelo did with the brush and paint on a two-dimensional surface, it confounds our sense of what is possible. We say to ourselves, how could a human have done that? And he was a better sculptor than a painter. A person with a strong sense of this is what I have been put on earth to do is more likely to accomplish great things than someone who doesn't." Yeah, that's why Christians produce much better art than atheists. If you say life is meaningless, then you don't have a calling. There is no point to your life. Just have a little fun. All right, so Charles Murray continues. The second blind spot in writing about history is a tendency to confuse what has been achieved with what would inevitably have been achieved. It is easy to assume that someone like Aristotle was not so much brilliant as fortunate for being born where he was. A number of basic truths are going to be figured out early in any field in mankind's intellectual history, and Aristotle gave voice to some of them first. So people might say, if it hadn't been him, maybe someone else soon would have. But is that really true? For example, Aristotle figured out formal logic. All right? Nobody had discovered logic that we know of before Aristotle in the preceding 5,000 years. The thinkers in the non-Western world had thousands of years after Aristotle to discover logic independently of him, and they did not. So you can't just say Aristotle was lucky. No, Aristotle was a freaking genius, okay? Okay, now Charles Murray continues. He says, "I come to the end of this book convinced that religion is indispensable in igniting great accomplishments in the arts. Great art requires a source of inspiration. When humans are performing at the height of human capacity, it seems wise to think that they are doing something right. Johann Sebastian Bach does not need to explain himself. He made a prima facie case that his way of looking at the universe needs to be taken seriously. It behooves us to do so." Yeah, he says, all you people, you want to criticize the Bible, criticize Christianity? Well, you know what? Take a look at the creators that based their life and their careers on it. They're the greatest ones that ever lived. Bach, Michelangelo, Isaac Newton, and on and on and on. You know, George Friedrich Handel, okay? They're magnificent. They're sublime. They're superlative. All these atheistic bullshitters, you know, they suck, okay? That's another reason why I'm a Christian. I wanted to be a great, you know, creative scholar and scientist. And this is where it comes from. I read all the novels, the books and stuff, because that's where it comes from. And it tells you, tell the truth, do what is right, do what is good. Don't be a lying bullshitter, scumbag, sell out for the money. Okay, and you have to accept some poverty if you're going to be that way, comparatively so. And most people aren't willing to do that. A belief in God inspires you to do the right thing. That's what Christ would want me to do. That's not just how I can get an extra, $100 this month. Okay, a few more quotes by Murray. He also had some video interviews about his book. You can find them on YouTube. He said Thomas Aquinas was a turning point in Christianity. He said he refocused Christian attention from the afterlife to the here and now on earth. And Aquinas said, it is pleasing to God when we study and understand his creations. This attitude motivated Catholics to study science. Christianity inspires people to want to study science. It's true. That's why the modern scientific method, it only came out of the Catholic Church and Christianity. Okay, and then it was the thing of the West. Okay, it did not happen in the other societies. And they didn't have a true scientific method in the days of Aristotle. It was more simply based on observation and logic rather than scientific experimentation with a hypothesis, analysis of data results, and reanalysis and creation of a new hypothesis. Okay, Christianity now, this is quoting Charles Murray again. Christianity taught that all human beings are invited into a personal relationship with God and that all individuals are equal in God's sight regardless of their earthly station. It is this theology that empowered the individual, acting as an individual, as no other philosophy or religion has ever done so. The message was realized more completely in one part of Christendom, the Catholic West, than in the Orthodox East. The crucial difference was that Roman Catholicism developed a philosophical and artistic humanism typified to a great extent engendered by Thomas Aquinas. He lived from 1226 to 1274. Aquinas made the case, eventually adopted by the Catholic Church, that human intelligence is a gift from God, and that to apply human intelligence to understanding the world is not an affront to God, but is pleasing to God. Aquinas taught that faith and reason are not in opposition. Faith and reason are complementary, and that's the truth. And that's why Stalin's Russia can't do jack shit, because he says we have to get rid of all religion. But religion inspires people to try to do something great and to tell the truth and that their life has meaning. So anyways, Aquinas is a big deal. Aquinas is a unifier of faith and reason. That's a big step in history. Okay, just another last quote. This is the last one here from Murray. He talked about secular humanism. He said secular humanism is weak. He said secular humanism has no moral foundation. Secular humanism cannot stand up to totalitarianism. Secular humanism cannot stand up to protect people who are mistreated. In comparison, Christianity is strong. Christianity says that man is created in the image of God and he should not be mistreated. That is a powerful moral foundation. Okay? That's non-negotiable in Christianity. And that's why Christianity can stand up to communism, and that's why communism hates Christianity, because they know it's the only thing that can stand up to them. All this moral relativism, secular humanism stuff, it's bullshit, it's weak, and it will quickly be destroyed. Only Christianity, if it's accepted by a large enough part of the population, would be able to stand up to communism. And because Christianity is fading into nothingness right now, and the church has been infiltrated by, antichrist scumbag like the modern pope's a piece of crap, that's why Christian world is so weak, and that's why it's being then you know what word comes next, cited. So anyways, I hope you found this interesting. Hope you found it useful.